Today on Your Money, are you rich? The billionaires of the world make us all think we're falling behind. But how do you compare to a typical American? We're breaking down the numbers for net worth for all age groups so you can see where you fit in. The numbers may surprise you. It's all right here on Your Money. Welcome to Your Money. I'm your host, Gordon Severson, here to help you save, spend, and invest your money wisely. Today, I'm joined by Grant Meyer from True Mix Advisors. Together, we're breaking down the numbers for net worth, how much wealth the average American family has at different stages of life. But first, Grant, let's talk about net worth. What exactly does that mean?
Yes, we don't really walk around every day using the words assets, liabilities, net worth, and many people don't know it off the top of their head. So I thought it'd be good just to take a step back and kind of define it and take a big picture view. So to calculate one's net worth, we first start with the word assets. Assets is just a fancy word of saying, what do you own? So you take the value of a home, the value of retirement accounts, the value of checking accounts, savings, and all the stuff you own, you add that up, and those are your assets. The next part of the equation, the liabilities. That's just, again, a financial term that just means the debt that you owe. Now, one caveat, so we're going to take a summary of all the debt that we owe. So that would be student loan debt, credit card debt, mortgage debt. When we're adding that up, though, if we're calculating net worth, I'd like everybody to write down what the interest rate on that debt is, because as interest rates change, perhaps there's some moves you need to make to obtain a lower interest rate, which could cost you less. So once you have your assets, everything you own, and you subtract your liabilities, everything that you owe money on, you then will have your net worth.
And I think this is a good measure for people because it takes a lot of things out of the equation. It takes out of the equation if it looks like you're rich. Because a lot of people have big houses. You have no idea if they're renting those homes, if they owe a lot of money on their homes, if they have fancy cars. This is actually dollars and cents, how much money you have minus how much money you owe other people and other companies.
Absolutely.
So it's pretty straightforward. And so for this discussion, we're using numbers from the Federal Reserve and the financial services company Empower. We're also looking at median net worth. Both of these sources also provide average net worth, but Grant and I believe that these numbers could be skewed by the super wealthy, the billionaires of the world. So we feel that the median numbers might be more accurate when it comes to a typical American family. Let's start out in the 20s. The Federal Reserve didn't have any data for the 20s, but Empower says the median net worth for someone in their 20s is about $7,500. And I'm sure a lot of people might be, surprised by that, thinking that's higher or that's lower. I'm sure that takes into account that a lot of people in their 20s, most of them still owe money at this point in their younger 20s.
Yeah, certainly early on in your 20s, it wouldn't surprise me if you have a negative net worth. Student loan balance would be a pretty big culprit right there. But typically in our 20s, we've just taken out our first debt. We're just maybe graduating college, getting our first jobs. We're just starting savings, so there's really not a lot to create net worth at that point in our life.
And 22 is very different than 29. I mean, this is a whole decade of numbers. And so, like we said, it's kind of the median. And so I'm sure someone in there at 29, the average might be like 30,000 or 40, but then like you said, at 21, 22, it might be negative 20,000 or maybe a negative 100,000 if someone really went to a nice college.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And so what, I guess, advice would you have for someone, right in the 20s to try to start to accumulate some net worth and to build a foundation for their financial future?
So I think the biggest thing in our 20s is actually to focus on financial education. So many things we do in our 20s is going to compound to have big effects later in life. So we want to make sure the decisions we're making with our money in our 20s are smart ones, not taking out high interest rate debt, starting to do savings like in a 401k plan with a company match. Doing the basic essentials and educating ourselves are going to be the key things we want to focus on in our 20s.
I remember my first job, I was 22, and my dad was very much like, you need to start your 401k right away. And I was like, really? I'm looking at my paychecks and like, I don't know how I'm gonna make the bills. And he's like, hey, start it. If you run into problems, then you can figure it out. But it was really smart because that money at age 22 has so much more time to grow for your future and has so many more years to accumulate.
And that's the trick. All the money that we can save early on, even though it may be small dollar amounts and may not seem like it's a lot of money, it compounds so quickly over time, and that's when the magic really happens. Likewise, if we make really poor decisions, we take out high interest rate debt, we go into bankruptcy, we ruin our credit, those things also could push back decisions later in life when we want to buy homes, when we want to buy cars, things like that. So the 20s is a good time to get a solid financial foundation, educate ourselves, and just begin the first steps towards building your net worth.
Let's move into the 30s. Empower says the median net worth for someone in their 30s is around $35,000. The Federal Reserve is doing their numbers a little differently. They say the average American under the age of 35 has a net worth of around $39,000. So these numbers are pretty close, 39 to 35. Like I said, the Federal Reserve is doing it a little differently. They're kind of lumping in everyone under the age of 35. What are your kind of thoughts on that 35 to 39,000 number there?
It's pretty realistic, I think. Again, in our 20s, we don't have the highest income that we're going to have yet, so we're just establishing ourselves. So in our 30s, it's great to see that net worth start to turn positive and move into a little bit bigger digits. Again, in our 20s and 30s, these are really foundational years. So the net worths should not be typically extremely high. It's making smart money moves, establishing ourselves in our financial lives. So these numbers seem pretty realistic to me.
And again, too, it's important to realize that this is, money in retirement account too. Like this is a lot of people, I'm sure, in a lot of that wealth is some of those retirement accounts that it feels weird because people may not see that as wealth or money because you can't really use it right now, but it counts towards your net worth.
That's a great point. Oftentimes we might lose track of retirement accounts because it's so far in the future, but you absolutely get to include those when you're calculating your net worth. Those are real dollars that will grow into something big in the future.
And I'm guessing that this decade, the 30s, is probably one that you're still seeing a wide range of situations because they're probably people that have been earning a lot of money that are doing really well that are much higher than that 35, but then in 30s there's still probably people who may still be negative that are still paying student loans or are still living paycheck to paycheck. The 30s, and also this is when people start to maybe have children or thinking about a house. This seems like a decade that could be a little complicated.
I think a great example might be somebody who went to further their education. They went past college, got advanced degrees. They went into master's programs or became attorneys or doctors or went on to advanced careers that require taking on substantial amounts of debt. And so it's absolutely possible that you're in your 30s and still have a negative net worth and that you're digging out of that hole. And that's okay. That is okay. Again, as long as we're paying down high interest rate debt, taking advantage of any 401k, 403b matches, doing all the smart moves, that will still compound and you will turn a positive net worth eventually if you're negative still in your 30s.
And I think we should have said this earlier, but our whole goal for doing this episode is to kind of show everyone some of the more accurate numbers. It's easy to get caught up in the whole comparison game with comparing yourself to your neighbors, seeing stuff that's going on, hearing about billionaires making all this money. So we thought it was just important to show what the actual numbers. I mean, the Federal Reserve, it doesn't get any more, trustworthy than some of those numbers. So this is where the average American is actually at.
And I'll emphasize one point you made early on. It's possible to look at someone, see a beautiful home, a beautiful car, and they're up to their eyeballs in debt. And so net worth really brings everybody onto an even playing field. And it's possible to over leverage your life, over borrow, overextend everything. And on the surface, you may look nice, you may not have the nice stuff, but your net worth could still be negative. Somebody could look like they don't have the nicest car or nicest home. They may have a really high net worth. They may be that millionaire next door. So absolutely, you can't just look at somebody and instantly know their net worth necessarily.
Yeah, there's actually one person in my life that I know is very wealthy, but drives probably the junkiest car out of anyone I know. And maybe that's part of it, is you don't spend a lot of your money and you keep saving it. Now, at this life stage, people are trying to grow their net worth. They are trying to accumulate money, and every dollar you save now can make a huge difference later on. Laura Painter breaks down 9 money rules to help you build your financial wealth.
We all have bills to pay. We're all working on a budget on a weekly, monthly basis, but you have to pay yourself first.
One way to do that is to follow 9 money rules.
I wish I could say I came up with this idea, but the credit goes to Harold Pollack, a University of Chicago social scientist. He says all the investment advice you'll ever need fits on a single index card.
Most of the rules fall into 2 buckets, saving and investing. The rules are: maximize your 401k, buy inexpensive mutual funds, never buy or sell an individual security, save 20% of your money, pay your credit card balance in full each month, maximize tax advantage savings vehicles, and pay attention to fees. Rules 8 and 9 are more philosophical. Make financial advisors commit to a fiduciary standard and promote social insurance programs.
The first one is maxing your 401k. That seems pretty easy. Can you explain that for our viewers?
Oftentimes, these companies will do matching contributions to whatever you put into your 401k. We eloquently call that free money, because that's exactly what it is. And if you don't participate in a 401k plan, oftentimes you're not eligible to receive those matching contributions.
Staying on the idea of saving, remember numbers 4 and 6. Save 20% of your money, and also set up other kinds of savings accounts that grow tax-free, like Roth IRAs and 529 college savings accounts.
Or the higher percentage that you save, the more quickly your net worth is going to grow.
Saving your money is great, but you'll also want to invest it too. Those are numbers 2 and 3. Sacramento-based financial planner Joseph Eshelman recommends being diverse, spreading your investments in different areas, including inexpensive mutual funds. Rule number 3 means you could better position yourself for consistent and reliable financial growth if you utilize the expertise of professional investors.
This is a great one too. We hear, and we've talked about it before, paying your credit card balance in full. Tell me more about that. Why is that so important for a lot of viewers and consumers out there?
And anytime you carry a balance on your credit card, you're paying interest to the credit card company. If you're paying it off every month, you're not paying interest. Obviously, hopefully that means more money in your pocket to build and save and grow your net worth.
Some great tips there. We are going to take a quick break here on Your Money. When we come back, we're moving into the 40s and 50s. Grant and I will break down the numbers and the challenges that may get in the way of growing your net worth. Stay tuned to Your Money. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, we are talking about net worth, how much money you have minus the money you owe. And we're breaking down the numbers at different life stages so you can see where you stack up against the average American family. Heading into the 40s, Empower says the median net worth is around $125,000. The Federal Reserve says Americans between 35 and 44, the median net worth is $136,000. Now, this is the decade that I think is going to surprise a lot of people, because that was a big jump.
Yes.
We went from 36,000 now into 6 figures, $136,000. What is going on from 30s to 40s that is accounting for that big jump?
2 big things. First off, the magic of compound interest. Saving in our 20s and 30s now is finally coming to bear in our 40s, and we're seeing those financial accounts grow. Potentially, if we started working out of college, we maybe have had 2 decades of saving into retirement accounts, getting company matches, so that's a big part of this. I think the other thing too is, most likely, people in our 40s, we are now on second career, third career. We've maybe changed jobs, gotten raises, gotten bonuses. So our potential to save has really been amplified. And so you take higher income and sprinkle in a little bit of that time from your 20s and 30s, and it's pretty cool to see how quickly net worth can grow.
Yeah, I'm sure people that have been following along may have seen the first 2. 7,500, okay, I can deal with that. 35,000, but then bam, 136. I can see this is where some of those gaps get even further, of like between people that really started early and people that didn't start early. This is where those gaps really start to emerge. But there is still time for these folks to start investing more or to start saving more money aside, even $10, $20 a paycheck start, it can really compound over time.
Yeah, and also I'll throw out there too is looking at these numbers, it can be a good gut check for yourself. And if you're ahead, that is indications that you're doing what's right and to continue. If you're behind, now if you're making choices of, do I buy that new car, or maybe do I hold off a year or two? Do we upgrade our home and get that nice new pretty home, or maybe do we save a couple more years, have a bigger down payment? Do we need to shift careers to increase our earning potential? If you're behind on those averages, it's just a good indication of what are some steps you might be able to take to kind of turn things in the right direction. And as you said, in your 40s, you're still relatively young. And so we don't need to feel that we're extremely behind. And there's going to be a big difference between somebody who's 40 and 49. Again, we're spanning such a wide array of ages. A decade, again, difference in income and savings can make a big difference. So,
yeah, and growth. I mean, we're thinking from age, I mean, with the numbers from the Federal Reserve, I think it was 35 to 44. That's, 9 years of growth. That's a very different number from the front to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot more time for investments to work, a lot more time to save. So again, if you're in the last half of that age group and you're behind, that's probably a better indication that maybe some catch-up might be required on your part.
For sure. Let's move into the 50s here. Empower says the median net worth is nearly $290,000. The Federal Reserve says the median net worth for Americans 45 to 54 is around $247,000. So this is another jump. I think it was 136 to 247 in a matter of 10 years, but it's not as jarring as that 36 to 136 because it's at this point things are kind of established and they're just kind of growing at this point.
Yeah, hopefully we've done the work and we've started saving, we're paying down debt, we're getting raises and earning more money. One potential pitfall in our 50s, we're in a decade where we might have kids starting to go into college, and we want to be cautious around taking on too much college debt for our college-age kids. So that's a potential trap. And the always evergreen example of keeping up with the Joneses. It's hard as we come into our peak earning years when we're in our 50s and we see those salaries and bonuses come in. Maybe we should splurge on that one vacation, and certainly you should enjoy life, absolutely. But again, if we use these average net worths as sort of a guide, if you're ahead of things, then maybe that's okay to do that splurge and enjoy life. And if we're falling behind a little bit, we can still make adjustments, and there's still time to make sure we get everything right. Now, the 50s are very important, though, because we're starting to come into retirement ages in the next decade. So we need to do the work in our 50s to make sure we're on track, so that way retirement could be a realistic possibility for us when we get to our 60s.
And this is the decade that a lot of people have their midlife crisis, where they start, and when that happens, you spend money. Like you go and buy a motorcycle, you go and buy, a boat or something crazy, or a nice car. And think about that. That's, that could be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 purchase. If you didn't make that purchase, like again, we're not saying don't live your life, don't have fun, but just think about like what that $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 can do over the next 20 years until you retire. Start to be thinking about those things.
Yeah, everything in moderation is good. And I think one thing that's different about the 50s, when we're in our 20s and 30s, our financial life can be a little less precise. It can be more broad strokes. Pay down debt, save. When we get into our 50s, we now have trickier assets. We may have financial accounts all over the place. We now need to worry about income tax and tax strategies. We might have children, so we need estate planning. Finances get more complicated in our 50s, and also that's when we want to do retirement projections to see if we're on track. So in our 50s, hopefully we're taking an analysis approach on our entire financial life to see where gaps might exist even beyond net worth.
For sure. All right, as you age, your financial goals do change, and so does your risk tolerance. Chris Radcliffe explains how your investing and money-making strategies should change as you get older.
When you are just starting out in your career, keep it simple. Set a budget and save a little, as that will pay big dividends for your future.
The first few years out of college, you should focus on developing good financial habits. You want to live below your means, follow a budget. You want to save a cash reserve for emergencies so you can avoid building up consumer debt, and then start making some investments for your future.
The second stage you will be in for quite a while. In fact, most of your working career.
The next stage,
guys
the
hearing, Audie?
accumulation years, that involves saving for retirement and your other financial goals like college
My idea
education
was
for
doing
your
that.
children, or maybe bigger vacations. Obviously, that process starts slowly, but then it'll build up as you reach your peak earning years, and hopefully the children leave home and get off the payroll, as I like to say. In addition to focusing on how much you save for those goals, you want to focus on where to save. Take advantage of tax-deferred accounts like 401ks, 403bs, or Roth IRAs, those types of accounts.
Shortly before retirement is when the fun begins. If you have been saving, time to really fine-tune that plan.
During the 5 to 10 years before retirement, you really want to tighten up your financial plan, make sure you're saving the right place, make sure you're saving the right amount of money to get to your retirement goal. And you also want to make sure you have a clear plan to switch from accumulating your assets to living off of them in retirement, because that is a difficult switch for a lot of people to make.
Ah, yes. And then there's retirement, where you want to live as long as you can to keep collecting from the government. But there is something to keep in mind.
The biggest mistake people make in retirement is underestimating how long they have left to live. A lot of people think, yay, I've made it. I can get out of stocks, get into bonds and CDs. But you really have to keep in mind you could face 20, 30 plus years of inflation, rising costs. So make sure your financial plan has a way to keep up with and outpace inflation over time, so you don't have to find yourself cutting back on spending later on in life.
Coming up after the break, we're heading into the 60s. The average net worth for Americans in their 60s and 70s coming up next. Welcome back. Today on Your Money, we are tracking net worth, how much wealth the average American has at different stages of life. We're now moving into the 60s. Empower says Americans in their 60s have a median net worth of about $445,000. The Federal Reserve says the median net worth is closer to $365,000. Now, this is very different numbers that we're starting to see a little bit of a different gap there. What is going on in the 60s? This is kind of the retirement decade where people are really starting to prepare for that big life change.
In our early 60s, we're coming up into retirement. So at 62 is the earliest you can collect Social Security. 65 is when Medicare can be filed for. Those are two pretty big pivotal moments in most people's retirement decisions. And then as we get a little bit later into our 60s, we have full retirement age for Social Security, which could be age 66, 67, depending upon when you're born. So there are a lot of milestones going on in this decade. The big decision, again, is going to be around retirement. And it's going to be how much have you saved, what your retirement goals are, do you have health care if you're retiring before 65, how should you claim Social Security. So net worth is going to be a key component of understanding if you can retire, when you can retire, how much you can retire on. So it certainly plays a pivotal role.
And I think some of those numbers look really big, especially for people that are maybe in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and go, wow, am I ever going to get to that point? But, if you're not at that age, you don't have that perspective yet, because that's so much more time for your money to grow over time. And also, if you're maybe in your 60s and you're seeing those numbers and going, I can't imagine having that much money. I'm sure there are more people that if they took all of their accounts and their equity in their house and other situations and added it all up, if they don't calculate net worth, they might be closer to that number than they might realize. The initial number might shock them, but when you add everything up, the average person might have a little bit more than they might realize.
Yeah, so this does include home equity. So if you've been living in your home for 20, 30 years, there's definitely going to be some appreciation in there that you can count. Mortgage balances have been paid down, so potentially there's more home equity there. Yes, it's your retirement accounts. Good to note, is it in pre-tax 401k IRA? Is it in tax-free Roth? Is it in a taxable account? So we can make a note around the types of assets we have. And yes, you're absolutely right. It involves all financial accounts. You add them all up together to get to that net worth. One comment to the 20-year-olds watching this. So imagine you're looking at a really large tree and you're holding an acorn and you think, how on earth does this acorn become a tree? And the secret is time. So you bury that acorn, you water it, you treat it right, and over time it grows into that huge tree. And that is exactly how retirement planning works. It may seem really small at first when you put that 10, 20 bucks away and you're saving in that 401k and you see 50 bucks go in. But those little steps are that acorn that does grow into that big tree over time, that does grow into that big retirement portfolio that gets you to those big net worth numbers that we see. Absolutely.
For sure. And moving into the 70s now, Empower says the median net worth in your 70s is about $372,000. The Federal Reserve says median net worth is $410,000. You'll notice with the Empower numbers, the numbers actually went down in the 70s. Why do you think they went down?
So we're spending now. Now almost everybody is around retirement age, retired. Typically at age 70 is the last age as late as you can collect Social Security. So once we get later into our 70s, we've been saving now for 5 decades, potentially 6 decades when you start working. And now is your time to enjoy it. So you actually should see your net worth go down because guess what? You can't take it with you. So it's a good thing to use your net worth, use your assets, spend those down to live the life that you want to live.
And at 70s, you're kind of, a lot of people are full into retirement. It's been a couple of years. And I'm sure people are kind of like used to that system of drawing out of their retirement. But I'm sure it's still important for these folks to meet with a financial advisor every once in a while and to keep track of their net worth, just to make sure that they're not spending faster than their money is kind of growing in their accounts. Because I'm sure you can get used to your routine and things can sneak up on you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of studies that talk about how much of our assets can we use in retirement. We use the term in the financial planning world called a safe withdrawal rate. And so you want to make sure that you're spending an appropriate amount. One other note too is our assets can move around a lot. The stock market can go down, that we can see a hit in our portfolio. Should we keep spending how much we've been spending if the market goes down? Mm-hmm. Could we spend more if the market goes up? So just because we're in our 70s and maybe decumulating spending doesn't mean that we can just back off and ignore net worth. We still want to track it and make sure that it's trending appropriately. Big thing as we get into our later 70s, as we come into our 80s, healthcare costs. So we may be still pretty young and active when we're in our 60s and 70s. We're traveling, we're seeing grandkids, we're doing all those fun things, and costs maybe have gone down for us a little bit, but sneaking up on us later in retirement, healthcare costs. So just always something to be aware of, that we still need money in the bank, we still need to save, we still need to fight off inflation and have our assets work for us.
Yeah, I mean, a good tip that I always love to share with people is an HSA account is a great retirement account, and people are like, oh, you can only spend it on healthcare costs. But as you get older, those costs are going to go up. You're more likely to go to the doctor. And so it is, in a way, guaranteed you're going to spend that money from an HSA, and you get some great tax savings. So consider that as in your 20s, 30s, 40s, even into your 70s. HSAs are great investment.
It's a really sneaky fun tip. HSAs are super cool. They're the only vehicle where you get tax-free contributions, tax-free growth, and tax-free withdrawals towards healthcare costs. And so they are phenomenal if we have the ability to do 401k match first, then utilize HSA. And it can really compound over time. A lot of HSAs allow you to invest in them. And so you can pick stock funds, bond funds, and watch the money grow. And you're spot on. If you leave your HSA alone and you have low medical costs, if you're fortunate enough to have that, the HSA can be used later in life towards bigger medical expenses.
Yeah. Great advice. I hope the numbers that we provided today were helpful. Our goal with this episode isn't to scare you if your numbers are lower than the nationwide average, or to give you a pat on the back if your numbers are higher. We're merely trying to give you a rough estimate of where the average American household stands when it comes to wealth. It's easy to lose sight of the real numbers when we're always seeing billionaires on TV and all the fancy things that people are buying on social media. Hopefully the episode today gave you a realistic take on the real numbers for average Americans. That's all we have for today. I'm Gordon Severson, helping you save, spend, and invest your money wisely. We'll see you next time.